Hello and welcome to the Bestseller Experiment, where we continue to discover what makes a bestseller and inspire you to start, finish, and publish your book. I'm Mark DeVoe.
And I am Mark Stay, and a big thank you to everyone who makes this show possible. Our wonderful patrons over on Patreon, our wonderful academates on the Bestseller Academy, and all of you who are listening today. And this week we welcome 2 new patrons, so budge up at the back. Make room, please. Make room for Deborah Rowe and Phil Oddie. Thank you, both of you, for your support. We simply could not do the show without you. Mr. D, how are you today, sir?
I'm doing good. I think we need to give everyone a public warning before we go into today's bestseller experiment. Mark and I were having a really fun chat before we started, and we got the giggles. So yes, if we start bursting out laughing for no reason whatsoever, we'll try and share why. But no, I'm in a great mood, to be honest, Mark. Life is good. Life is good. I've had my shot yesterday, and
good.
Bloody hell, it hurts. I was like, I walked out of the room going, what was it? I didn't even notice it. I said, is it done? She said, yeah, I've already done it. I said, oh, I was waiting for you to pull out the monster needle. And she goes, no, that was it. And I was like, oof. Sat there for 15 minutes. No worries. Walked out of there like Superman. Everyone's like, oh, how was it? How was it? Piece of cake. Absolutely brilliant. Superman. And then 24 hours later, I'm like, oh, bloody hell, my arm's really hurting. And then, oh, I'm really knackered. Kids, yeah. I'm going to bed. So I crashed last night and I feel brilliant. So I've had loads of sleep and feel a bit better. But I just want to say to everyone out there, especially the volunteers who are doing all of the inoculation, the vaccines, absolutely brilliant. Good on everyone doing it. I felt coming out of that room very humbled by all of the incredible people that were in there just helping people, and it was lovely. It was a lovely experience. So I just want to thank everyone who's out there that's helping in any way. You are all absolute superstars.
It really restores your faith in humanity, because there's so much bad news at the moment, and then you see these people, like you say, just doing what they do. And I came out of there feeling, I mean, I think I said this on a previous show, but you feel like you've beaten it. You know, you feel like you've got through something, and it's the innovation with the vaccine and all the work that people put into it. We're going to be talking about these times for the rest of our lives. It's just extraordinary. Yeah,
it is incredible. And what was one of the nicest moments I had was when I was sitting there with the nurse, and she really took her time. It was lovely. She didn't. It wasn't like right, next one through. It was like, you know, actually sitting down and having a chat. And the nice thing was that we were talking about things we're looking forward to, you know, once we get back to some degree of normality. And the one thing that we both said that we're really looking forward to is hugging people. I wanted to give her a big hug in that moment. I was like, oh, can't give her a big hug. So I'm really looking forward to that side of things. And I keep saying to everyone who's was getting really down about COVID for the whole year, I've kept on saying there's going to be so many good things that are going to come out of this. Not least amazing books. I mean, there are a lot of people who've had a lot of time to contemplate writing, a lot of time to study writing, and a lot of time to write. And I'm really excited to see this complete overwhelm of great books coming out. It's a bit like music right now. So many great albums on the horizon. I'm so excited. And it's going to be, I think, the most active period in history of new releases over the next year to 2 years, I think, which is something to hugely celebrate about what we show up for each week.
Absolutely. It's I mean, the thing is, there will be people who will have sat through this and not been able to write at all, and I totally understand that. I totally understand if it's just been too much, you know. But if you've managed to put pen to paper, if it's given you the time to do this for the first time in your life, then curiosity, and let us know about that. Tell us about it. You know, we'd love to hear your good news stories.
Yeah, and how much, but for people that have been struggling to write or have written and thought, just not really getting it together, and they're not, it's because their mood isn't in that right place to write the best they can write. I always go back to that thing that Bryan Cranston says. We keep repeating it on this show, but you know, having been through this year of challenges, your writing is going to be so much richer over the next rest of your life because of what you've experienced, because of what we've experienced. There's going to be such a deeper well to draw from, and there's nothing about really experiencing something. I mean, when we go into our fiction worlds and write, we are drawing from our own life, but we are making a lot of things up. But the more kind of conflict we've experienced in life, I think the deeper our well is that we can draw on. So I think there's just going to be a dearth of brilliant fiction and non-fiction coming out in the next couple of years. So get on it, folks. Get writing and get inspired and draw from those emotions that you've been through, the ups and downs. But Mr. Stay, talking about all kinds of fun things happening in your world. What's all this about non-profanity? I know this has come up in the coaching about swearing in books, but you mentioned before the show, you've had to do a non-profanity version
of the film. Yeah, well, the film Unwelcome, which
is that right?
No, it's the film. It's the film Unwelcome, and the studio has to deliver different versions of the film. It's not that there's just one version of the film. So you have, there's obvious stuff like there'll be a closed captions version, there'll be an audio descriptive version for the vision impaired, but also, and weird things like you get a 4:3 version. Normally we haven't all got, but many of us have got widescreen TVs, but you've got to deliver a 4:3 version, which just seems weird to me. But they've got to prepare for every eventuality. And of course, you have to, well, I say of course, you have to provide a version without any profanity in it. Now, this is a horror movie with quite a bit of blood and gore. So I don't know what they're going to do about that, but also quite a bit of fruity language in this as well. So I was the sound mixer. I've been doing ADR anyway, which is automated dialogue recording, or sometimes it's known as additional dialogue recording, which is when you get the main actors back in and they will dub lines that are either unclear or we need an extra line here or there for a bit of clarity or whatever.
This I've got to jump on this because this is something a lot of people don't realize actually happens. And I didn't know this for quite a while until somebody said, yeah, well, what do you do if like a plane flies overhead and you're filming outside and the dub track's ruined? So how much has to actually be redubbed in a typical, out of say some Unwanted, for example? Is it usually a small percentage, a middle chunk, or the majority?
If you're shooting on a studio on a soundstage, and soundstages are called that because they are soundproofed, they block out you could have an aircraft flying over and you wouldn't hear anything. Where we filmed, they created this enormous soundstage, but it was essentially a giant tent, and you could hear cars and planes and things. So there were moments where we all had to stand there while something flew by or drove by. So if you're in a controlled environment, actually. But they record dialogue separately anyway, because you're also talking about massive sound mixes, Dolby Atmos and what have you, where it's like 40 speakers around the cinema or whatever. Sound mixing, as you all know, Mr. D, is a dark art. It's something that's just incredible and transforms a film. But there are some films that you'll watch where hardly any of it is recorded on set. It's all done in ADR, and it's so well done these days. Like if you go back and watch films from the 70s, where it was really obvious that, Jaws is one for this, actually. There's loads of ADR in Jaws where someone would be talking like this, and suddenly it's much louder, and then suddenly it goes quiet again. Or there's just there's suddenly all this white noise in the background, and then it's gone. Those old 70s movies, you could really spot it. The other thing is, if you're ever watching a film and someone turns their back to the camera and you hear them say something, that was probably dubbed on.
Exactly.
Because, they'll be going, oh, we need to tell the audience that so-and-so is her brother. How do we do that? And then they'll find a shot where someone's, turned their back to the camera. They go, put it there.
I love it.
Sort of sense
that's
of panic.
Brilliant.
So there's that. There's the ADR. But I've also been doing background stuff, which is quite low in the mix. So it's people having conversations in pubs. We've got a bit where there's a couple of police officers on a radio, and I had to do. And I want to thank Lisa Cutts, the author, Lisa Cutts, who's been on the podcast before. She's a working copper, and I sent the dialogue to her and said, "Okay, is this wrong? Is this right?" And she sent me a couple. I love acronyms. If you're doing police stuff, she sent me some acronyms, Zulu Tango this or whatever, which was brilliant. So thanks to Lisa for that. And some of it is based on. So we had background actors, and some of them were just improvising, talking about stuff, and some of it was picked up. So the sound mixer said, "These two are talking about painting. So can you do a bit of dialogue around that?" So I'm like, "Great, yeah, I'm going to go." So and you write it long. Yeah. So they'll get some actors in who will read that, and then they'll drop it in, and it'll be so low in the mix you'll hardly hear it, but it's there, and it's all part of the sound mix and the makeup, So, but I had to do a non-profanity version of the film. And this is the sort of thing, if you can go and look these up if you go on YouTube and look up Snakes on a Plane is probably the most egregious and famous example of this, where Samuel L. Jackson swearing every other line, but he will say, I've had enough of these mother flipping snakes on this mother flipping plane or whatever. And it's so obvious because the lips don't match the movement. But apparently we have to do this. Now, you used to have to do this for when they showed it on airplanes, because, you know, you and I will remember. I was going to say,
because it's all there for, like, it'd be that little screen, wasn't it? One screen. It never worked. And everyone would be like, no! 16 hours of staring at windows. Because that's all we want. That's what we've paid our money for. We want to watch a crappy movie on a little microwave-sized screen that flips down and someone... I know. But on that note, I just to pause you there for a minute, I have a very funny story about that, because I watched Die Hard on a plane. And I was a bit younger, and I wasn't really. Maybe I'm dating myself here, but that somebody kept being called a melon farmer. I'm like, what's a melon farmer? It was only when I saw the actual original.
That's exactly
years later. Brilliant. I thought I want to find a dictionary of all the best kind of alternative versions of swear words as used in airplane versions of films.
Well, that's what I had to do. But I mean, the thing is, airplanes now, there's a screen on the back, and there's, you know, there are parental controls. So if you don't want your kids to watch anything with swearing, you can choose that when you book your ticket now, I believe, you know. So you know, there's no real need for it. So, but it's something we have to deliver. So I was given, you know, scenes in the film and lines of dialogue that I had to change. So there's a lot of replacing the F-bomb with flipping this, flipping that. Or fupping, which is one that's
but that actually sounds like the actual word, doesn't it? It's so close.
It's used on Father Ted. There's a Father Ted episode where he goes, "Have you taken my fupping whistle?" And I thought, it's an Irish film. I'm gonna put fupping in there. So we've got that in there too. So you know, you can have fun with it. There was my favourite line was, he says, just incidentally, he says, "Oh, they ate my effing grapes." So I've changed that to, "They ate my juicy grapes." And I just feel sorry for the actors who will have to go into a recording booth like Toast of London and do this.
You could have so much fun with that. You could.
Oh, I did.
Do you know what, though? There's certain jobs. We often sit around at Christmas when we pull crackers and we read how bad the cracker jokes are. And it always comes up in conversation, like, who actually does this for a job? Yeah. Who writes these things all year round? They're so bad. But I thought, what a brilliant job to actually be like a specialist in, right, you send me all your swear words in your movies, and I am like the world expert in replacing them with the best lines, and at the same time giving the actors a real challenge by not laughing so much when they have to re-record it. I think it's great. There's got to be a job title that we could create for that, and maybe find somebody who does that as a. I mean,
someone has to write the subtitles for translations, you know, and when it's done badly, it's terrible. You know, we've watched those foreign language films where the subtitles or the dubbing is terrible, but when it's done well, it's like Studio Ghibli. When they redid a lot of their movies, so I think it was A Princess Mononoke, they got Neil Gaiman to do the subtitles, to do the English language screenplay. Neil Gaiman, and it transforms the film. It's just, you know, it takes it to another level.
Talking of language, Mark, I want to show you something.
Uh-oh.
I got this. I ordered this thing. I'm big into my Pomodoro, and I'm using like these special timers. If you're on YouTube and watching this, you can see I'm using these special timers. But this came from China, and when I opened the box up, I thought, oh God, they've sent me the wrong thing, because what it says on the top here, you won't be able to see it, but on this little sticker it says 60-minute visual anal.
Just so we were doing so well. We were doing skirting around the swearing. You have to lower the tone.
Let me explain. Let me explain. It's an analog timer. Okay, everyone, a visually analog timer. I just want to put that in there. But you can have so much fun with language. Anyway, let's move on. It's brilliant. One thing we must talking about the most. I did warn people would be laughing heads off this show. One thing that we are celebrating. We always talk about everyone celebrating their wins, big or small, sending us their dream declarations. Well, we want to celebrate this week because we have something to announce, which is really exciting. Over a year and a bit ago, we launched the 200-word challenge. For if you're new to the podcast, it's an incredible challenge where all you have to do is write 200 words a day, good, bad, or ugly. It doesn't matter. Just get 200 words a day down as a minimum every day. We've got people now. I mean, firstly, we should just celebrate. One kind of like OG, if you like, our original gangster when it comes to the 200-word challenge, Mr. Mark Hood, who has recently passed 500 consecutive days of writing a minimum of 200 words. Isn't that bonkers?
Wow.
So congratulations, Mark, and congratulations to all the people he's inspired, because Adam Jarvis, another academate that we have in the Bestseller Academy, has just hit 250 words.
Wow.
Which is incredible. So
250 words, 250
days. Sorry, yes. 250 words, days, whichever one you want, but consecutively. But the most important thing is what we're seeing through this challenge is that people are discovering it is possible to write, even if you have 16 kids, 4 jobs, and everything else going on in life, you can still write 200 words a day. There's no one in the world that hasn't got 10 or 15 minutes to get those words down. And just to thank every single person, we have over thousands of people now doing the 200-word challenge. But just to congratulate everyone who's been banking their words, which means they're actually coming to the website each day and they're saying, yeah, Mr. Stay does it. I do it as well. 250 words, 201 words, 6,000 words, like whatever you've written in the day, you bank it. And we've been collating every single day for the last 18 months or so. And as of this week, ready, Mr. Stay, a bit of a drum roll, we have reached 15 million words banked, which is absolutely
fantastic.
Blooming incredible. So thank you everyone who's been doing the 200-word challenge. That's a lot of books that have been written. And if you are inspired, if you haven't joined up yet, what are you waiting for? And if you have joined up and you've fallen off the horse, which everyone does, by the way, everyone falls off the horse. It's not as easy as it sounds. It's about building a habit for life, and it takes a long time to build a habit for life. But get over to the 200-word challenge, 200wordchallenge.com, and sign up. And start your streak. So that means how many days can you write before you fall off the wagon? That becomes your personal best, and then you have to try beat it. So it's not about failing. It's not about, I didn't write today. It's about how many consecutive days can you write in a row. So well done, everyone. And you, Mr. Stay, as well, because you've banked a ton of words. You actually, how many books have you now written with the 200-word challenge? Is it 2?
2. And 4, 5, 6 short stories.
6 short stories.
Yeah. Yes, and actually a couple of script projects as well, because I'm doing a first draft of a pilot, and I'm doing it handwritten, so I'm counting that.
That's amazing. Do you know what? I was looking at the statistics the other day, which you can't see, unfortunately, in the public world, but I can, because I'm doing a lot of research on the stats. But I can announce that Mr. Stay's in like the top 25.
I should bloody hope so.
Which is amazing. So keep up the good work, everyone. And we have a brilliant interview today that you're going to love this interview. Before we dive into that interview, though, I just want to remind everyone, if you're inspired by writing consistently, if you want to break through, if your dream is to always try and write a bestseller or as good a book as you possibly can do, we are opening the doors to the Bestseller Academy. We're taking on a limited number of people over the next few weeks. So pop over to academy.bestsellerexperiment.com and register now, because it will sell out again, as it has done in the last couple of years. So dive across to there. Now, Mr. Stay, our guest this week, what an interview this is.
We'll talk about 15 million words. I mean, that's just a drop in the ocean for our guest this week. Dean Wesley Smith is basically one of the most prolific writers working in modern fiction. He's a USA Today best-selling author. He's published something like 200 novels, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of short stories. He's written all sorts of tie-ins as well. He's worked a lot in the Star Trek universe, Men in Black, Spider-Man, X-Men. He writes with his wife, we learn about how they work as collaborators, and it's absolutely fascinating. Christine Catherine Rush, and they've written together under the name Catherine Wesley. I mean, this guy is just a powerhouse. What I love about this And I do love Dean. Talking to him was a real privilege, and we had a number of listeners say, "Look, you've got to get him on the show." He doesn't hold back. He has opinions, and we're going to love those opinions. We're going to talk about those opinions at the end. I don't want to spoil anything for anyone, but this is great fun.
Excellent. So let's dive in and listen to Mark chatting with the amazing Dean Wesley Smith.
Dean Wesley Smith, welcome to the Bestseller Experiment. How are you today, sir?
I'm doing very well, thank you, and thanks for having me.
Oh, this is going to be such an absolute treat. You're such a prolific author that I actually have one of your novels, and I didn't realize it was you. It's actually the tie-in book to the 10th Kingdom, the TV miniseries, and it's written here by someone called Catherine Wesley, which is the pseudonym for yourself and Christine Catherine Rush. So this is you're such a prolific author. I've got books and didn't even know I had them. Let's just establish how prolific you are. What are the latest numbers when it comes to novels published and such?
Oh, probably around 200 or so. Some of them, I can't claim because I ghosted them back for basically big traditional publishers out of New York would hire me because I was fast and I could mimic other writers' voices. And so they'd have these bestsellers that got sick or couldn't turn in a book, and they'd already advertised it. And they would come to me and throw a lot of money at me, and I'd write the novel. And so I did that numbers of times, probably 15 or 20 in the middle of the 90s up to the first part of 2000.
Right. But you can't name names for any of those yet, can you?
No, not on those. There were a few of them that were outed because the authors couldn't handle lying. and there were some celebrities that were outed. I did a thriller for a Christian writer, and he ended up putting my name on the inside of the book. And then I did Jonathan Frakes. I was going to write a book and he was going to have his name on it, but he couldn't handle that. So he put my name on the inside of the book too. And there were 3 or 4 like that. Eric Catani, I did a science fiction novel for that I thought I never got outed until someone walked up to me at a convention and said, "Would you sign this?" And I said, "No, I didn't write it. That's Eric Catani's book." And he opened it up and showed my name on the inside. And I'm like, well, I guess I can sign it. But about 200 under various names and my own name under Dean Wesley Smith.
Yes. And of course, you mentioned Jonathan Frakes. There's a big Star Trek connection. I love on your bio, you write that you've written maybe a dozen or so Star Trek books as well, which
couple dozen.
Couple actually. Of dozen. Sorry. What's a dozen between friends?
A lot of them. And I edited for Star Trek for about 10 years too, in a series called Strange New Worlds. Interestingly enough, it's now going to be the next television series, but it won't have anything to do with what I did. Right. But I edited a anthology for Star Trek for 10 straight years called Strange New Worlds.
Yeah, I read a great many of them. And on top of that now, you're blogging on a daily basis, and you're doing something called Smith's Monthly Short Stories. Tell us about those.
Well, actually, I am blogging on a daily basis. I started it, 8 years ago and haven't missed a day, which is mind-boggling when I think about it. That's at deanwesleysmith.com. And sometimes they're decent blogs, and other times they're, "Hi, I'm still alive, go away," kind of blog. But, I always write something every night. And the Smith's Monthly is a magazine, and I did it for 44 straight months, starting, way back. And then I took a couple years off when Chris got sick and things like that. And now it's back up and running. Basically, every issue has a novel, one of my novels, 4 or 5 of my short stories, and then usually another book or a serial of another book that I wrote. It's all mine. It's all my content every month.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I just turned in the 3rd one of the restart. So issue 45, 47 just got turned in.
Wonderful. Well, Dean, we have a whole bunch of listener questions. We've never had such a reaction because I got in touch with you because a couple of our people in the academy were mentioning you. A couple of people on our Facebook group mentioned you. I think we've got to get this guy on the show, and we've got a great number of questions. So let's jump right in, if that's okay with you. I've got a question from Jeff White. How the heck does he get so much writing done? What's his secret? Amphetamines, insomnia, super speed. Dean, what is the secret?
Well, actually, I'm a fairly slow typist. I usually write about 1,000 words an hour because I started off, I couldn't type, so I was hunting and pecking, a couple fingers. Now I have a few more fingers involved, but I'm still pretty slow. And I've been at this for a long time. That's part of the secret. But the other part of the secret is I just spend more time in writing than other people do. That's bottom line. I spend more time in the chair. And so there's nothing magical, or I don't type fast or anything else. I just spend more time in the chair. And I always have. I've always outworked everybody. I have kind of a blue collar work ethic. That's how I was raised. But I don't consider writing work. I consider it play. And so when I'm sitting down and writing, it's just like, oh, this is just too much fun. I get to sit alone in a room and make stuff up, and people pay me enormous amounts of money to do so, and it's just silly. But I've been doing it for a long time. I've been a full professional since 1987. I sold my first novel in 87 and went full time at that point and never looked back.
Wonderful. How did it start for you? Were you always jotting away at school stories? Was it something that you were always into?
No, I hated writing. When I was young, I was into sports and things like that. I absolutely couldn't write anything. I'm not one of those people who, from 3 years old wanted to be a writer. I hated it. I didn't even think about starting to write until after I was a golf professional back in the early 70s. And until I decided to go back to college, and because I was out of the 60s, that's how old I am. But I decided to go back to college in the early 70s, 74. I had to take a class because I was majoring in architecture. I wanted to be a golf course architect. And I had to take this stupid English class for non-majors. And they made me write some poetry and actually mail a couple of them. And I actually, the only person out of the class that ever sold one, mailed, won in national contests, and sort of thought, well, this is kind of fun. And wrote a couple short stories the way I do now, way back then, sold both of them, and then thought, oh, I better start learning about writing. And of course, the minute I thought that, I got into all the myths and all the stupidity of writing. And I spent 7 years without selling a thing, without even getting a personal rejection. After I'd sold 2 stories, never occurred to me that I should go back to the method that I sold the 2 stories with. And I sold about 60 or 70 poems. I was a nationally known poet and all that. And I had no desire to ever write, just none. And as it started to become fun, after I got through those 7 years of stupidity, I just kept going. And
wonderful. We'll get onto the stupidity in some of the later questions. We have a question from Matt who says, what do you do if you're partway through a manuscript or when you finish one and you realize the story isn't as interesting as you would like? Do you rewrite it from scratch, scrap it, send it out anyway, move on to the next project, something else?
Oh, yeah. Just you got to finish it. You finish it and send it out. Heinlein's rules. I live by Heinlein's rules. I do my best to stay on them. Heinlein's rules are basically, you must write. That's rule number 1. Rule number 2, you must finish what you write, period, no matter what you think of it. Rule number 3 is you must not rewrite. Rule number 4 is you put it on a market. Either now you publish it indie or you get it out to a magazine, or not to traditional publishing, book publishing. They're all scammers now. But you get it out indie. And in the old days, you used to mail it to publishers and stuff. And then the 5th rule is you keep it out and keep it for sale out there. So I just live by those 5 rules. They're very hard to follow. Heinlein came up with those rules in, I think, 1947. And he said in the article that he put down those rules, he said that they are almost impossible to follow. And that's why there are so few professional writers and so many people who want to be writers. Actually, he called them aspirants. But But yeah, I started in 1982 following Heinlein's rules, and have never looked back. I started selling again because that's what I did with my first 2 stories, is accidentally followed Heinlein's rules. I wrote it, didn't rewrite it, mailed it, and both of them sold. So when you're partway through a manuscript, you just finish it. What happens at that point is, what's stopping you is your critical voice. And the minute you let your critical voice into a story, and it overwhelms your creative voice. So you just have to trust the creative voice and just keep writing, finish it. No matter what you think of it, you put it on the market and then go on to the next story, which is another reason why I am so prolific. I never look back. I never look at the old stories. I just keep writing new all the time. A lot more fun too.
Yeah, yes, definitely. Finishing is one of the most. It's one of these things we drum into our listeners all the time. Is just finishing is the most important thing, because so often we find, starting a story is kind of easy. You get the ball running, you have fun with it, and sooner or later you have to make story decisions. Your characters have to make choices that have consequences, and then you kind of get bogged down in decisions. And should I do this? Should I do that? This brings me to Liz Green's question. She says, "How do you know what your characters will do next? If I don't know what my characters will do next, what do I need to do differently?" And this is what can stop people in their tracks, isn't it? Making those difficult decisions. Characters make choices that have consequences. Do you ever get bogged down like that?
No, no, because I write into the dark. I start off with a title, usually, or some phrase or something. I don't have any idea who my characters are or anything else. I just start writing, and I let the characters direct me. My creative voice has the characters, and they'll get into corners and places where I'll, if my critical voice will go, "How are you going to get them out of there?" And I'll go, "I don't care. I'm just going to write the next sentence." Mm-hmm. And all I do is write the next sentence, and then I write the next sentence, and eventually I find my way to the end of the story. Mm-hmm. And so I don't have any idea what my characters are going to do. They often surprise the hell out of me, and I just have a blast because I don't care. See, if you care about what your characters are going to do next, and you care, what you're caring about is a story, a product, instead of the actual writing process. What I care about is having fun in the process of writing and following my characters. Whatever comes out at the end comes out at the end. It's just, I just let that be, which is why I've made so much money over the decades. Is because if I don't know what my characters are going to do, my readers sure don't know. And that's the key to making stories. Like, how the heck did he figure out all of that? Well, I just wrote the next sentence.
A lot of that confidence of just saying, "I'm going to keep going," that comes from experience. That comes from the experience of finishing things, knowing that you have got to the end and the world hasn't ended.
No, I did this right from minute one. What it comes from more than anything else is just basically stop caring about the end product and care about having fun writing and becoming a better storyteller. If you stop caring about the end product and you stop worrying about the manuscript and, will it sell, or will people laugh at me, or all of those silly things that, nobody can hurt you in fiction writing. I mean, it is the safest thing you can do, because there is nothing. But see, so all the fear in fiction is made up. It's all inside your own head, which is, of course, where the creative voice lives too. So you have to get all that stuff out of your way and just plug into the creative voice and go play. Just go have fun. And whatever comes out at the end, comes out at the end. No big deal.
Wonderful, wonderful advice. We've got a bunch of questions from Josh Atkinson. What's Dean's writing process for those weeklies? And how do you manage switching from short stories to novels? And how do you manage switching between genres? Now, having heard your answers already, I'm guessing none of this is a problem for you. I'm going to write a Western. I'm going to write a fantasy.
I don't have a clue what I'm going to write when I start. All I do is I sit down and like, let's write. And I'll be going along and they're like, this sort of feels like it's going like a novel. We'll see where this goes. Or I have a lot of series characters. I have like 15 or 20 different series that I write in. And every so often one of those characters will just pop up and I'll go, it's a poker boy story, or, it's one of my diving and, or it's one of my cold poker gang stories, or things like that. And so I don't even worry about genre as a marketing aspect. And I couldn't care about marketing when I'm writing. All I care about is the process of writing. So if you're worried about switching a genre or doing something, see, you're already worried about the product at the end, whatever's going to come out. And the moment you start worrying about that product, your critical voice gets in and shuts you down. And so, you just Just let it be what it wants to be. Let the story either be a short story or a novel. Just if it wants to be a romance, let it be a romance. If it wants to be science fiction, let it be science fiction. And then you worry about marketing it when you're done at the end.
Yeah.
Then you worry about where you're going to put it.
Yeah,
and how you're going to sell it.
I guess that's the thing. If you sit down, crack your knuckles, think, I'm going to write a fantasy novel, then you start thinking about fantasy genre conventions, and then that's just another thing that's going to slow you down, isn't it?
Yep. Automatic.
Wonderful.
It'll crash you. It'll stop you cold. The minute you start worrying about the end product and, oh, what genre is this? And, oh, is my mother going to like this? You're done. You're done. What you do is put all those thoughts out of your head and say, what's the next sentence?
Yeah.
And then just write the next sentence. That's all. It's very simple. It's very simple. And have fun. Part of the fun is think of novels a lot like getting on a roller coaster. Mm-hmm. You climb on and it's pretty tame and you know where you're going at the start. And then suddenly you're all over the place. And you're scared and maybe a little bit thrilled and a little bit this and a little bit that. Well, that's the process of writing a novel. And then at the end, you come coasting back into the deal and you can start again.
Wonderful. Now, you mentioned stupidity earlier, so we might get onto this. Laura Shepard has a very good question, which is, are there any classic writing rules Dean thinks people should ignore? And you talked about that 7 years of stupidity. Take us through that and the writing rules.
Oh, what happened with me in those 7 years is I bought into all the myths of writing. See, professional writers, even though the problem with long-term professional writers is that we have fans. Now, I like my fans, but I don't lie to them, where most professional writers feel they have to. So they'll say, oh, I've done 3 drafts or 4 drafts or 27 drafts or some stupid number like that. And so rewriting. And that's taught by, classroom type of stuff. And it's basically put out because readers know these same rules, so know these same myths. And so, if you're a writer and you go into like a signing or something and you say, yeah, I wrote this book in about, 2.5 weeks and only 1 draft, people are going to be hesitant to put out money for it. Mm-hmm. But if you stand up there and lie to them, because that's your job, Lawrence Block called it telling lies for fun and profit. Basically you stand up there and say, yeah, this book took me quite a while from its generation point to, you just lie through your teeth. And that's what the big bestsellers do. That's why you'll hear Stephen King or Kuntz or people like that, who all are one draft writers, basically just lie through their teeth because they want the people to say, oh, I'll pay you $15 or $30 for that hardback, but if you stand up there and say, yeah, I wrote this in about a week and a half and didn't even rewrite it. No. So the classic writing rules, you should ignore rewriting. That's just bogus. That's the worst thing. That is, I think the transition from becoming a beginning wannabe writer to becoming a professional writer is when you stop rewriting. And when you rewrite, what's happening is you're rewriting from your critical voice. So you're killing your own voice. You're killing all of the originality of a story because you're dumbing it down. And so it's the word polish. I just shake my head when someone says, oh, I had to polish that story, because what occurs with polishing is, imagine a really beautiful rock that you found like on the beach or something, and it's got sharp edges and it's got all kinds of cool stuff. And then you throw it in a polisher and it comes out looking like every other polished rock. And that's what you don't want to happen. You want to leave the sharp edges. You want to leave the inconsistencies. You want to leave the stuff that makes it your voice and your story. And that's what sells. And so in those 7 years, I sold those 2 short stories and all those poems. And then I thought, oh, I better learn writing. And so I started reading all the stuff from teachers and people who never did write a book about, oh, you got to rewrite 12 times and you've got to polish this and you've got to do that. And you got to have everything in perfect grammar. Nobody talks in perfect grammar. If you've got Strunk and White, that thing, throw it out the window. If you're, basically that sort of stuff, because that's not what fiction is. That's what nonfiction is, but that's not what fiction is. And fiction is real people talking like I'm talking right now. I don't think I've said a grammatically correct sentence since I started, but the reality here is that you get rid of those are classic writing rules that hurt. I went into those rules rewrote everything. The old cliche about, oh, if you write slower, you write better. Well, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. No, you just write, let your creative voice put it down, and then put it out. But I fell into all those, and it took me 7 years before I finally discovered Heinlein's rules and went, well, wait a minute. Ray Bradbury's writing sometimes a story a day, sometimes a story a week. He didn't rewrite. Harlan Ellison sits in bookstore windows and doesn't rewrite anything, never touches his manuscripts again, writes on a typewriter. Basically, at that point, King had actually made a couple comments about things. This was back in 1982 when I finally got out of that 7-year in the desert. And I was about ready to quit, just like anybody would quit after 7 years of no success. And the moment I went back to following Heinlein's rules, I just wrote, I finished, I didn't rewrite, didn't get feedback from anybody other than I fixed a few typos and mailed it. And I immediately started selling stories again because I let my voice come out. And from that point on, I've never looked back.
Fantastic. You used a phrase earlier, writing into the dark. Tell us about that.
That's just basically you don't have any idea where you're going. You don't have an idea. You don't have an outline. You don't plot. I don't even have characters until one of them appears right in the opening somewhere. You just into the dark. It's like the room is completely dark, and you're putting color in it, and you're putting light in it, and off you go, and you don't have any idea where you're going. The minute a writer says, "Oh, I got to this point, and I needed to figure out where I was going," I'm like, "Well, you're done. You're done. It's going to be a boring book because if you have to figure it out, that comes from your critical voice." And the critical voice is it's just dull. It's going to make it safe. It's going to make it just like everybody else's book. And so the minute you have to figure something out, the readers will figure it out too, and you'll be done. It'll be a boring book, and nobody will buy any more from you.
Wonderful. We got a question from Queeve McDonnell, who says, ask Dean to explain the bakery concept. It's great and the core of his approach to the business. So tell us about the bakery concept, Dean.
Yeah, that's on the business side, not on the writing side. Mm-hmm. Basically, what we don't sell stories. We license them. We license copyright is what it is.
Yeah. And
copyright is magical. It is just magical when you actually stand back and look at it. Which beginning writers just don't. They don't even understand copyright. They think they're selling their stories. No, you're licensing stories. For example, let me give you the most clear example. You got a bakery, okay? And you walk in the door, and if you've only written 1 or 2 short stories or novels, you walk in the door and you've got 1 pie and a cupcake sitting on a shelf, and that's all you got in the entire bakery. And all the other shelves are empty. As a customer, what do you think the customer is going to do? They're going to turn around and leave because there's no product. It looks empty. Okay, so that's why beginning writers take a while to build up. It takes a bunch of stuff. The second part about a bakery is say you have, like my bakery is just jam full. I mean, I got 600-700 short stories out there, and 200 novels, and I don't know how many nonfiction books and all the other stuff I've done over the years. So my bakery, you walk in and it's got choices for everybody. So I'm constantly selling stuff. So see the analogy there? The other side of it is that from the copyright side, you've got, say, a plate of cookies. Those are short stories that you have up, say, on Amazon, that you have licensed to Amazon, and they're licensing those stories to their customers. So a customer in say Great Britain buys a cookie. Well, does that cookie disappear from your platter in your bakery? No, it just magically is still there. Even though someone bought the cookie is still there and can be continually resold over and over. It's magic. It's just magic. You can continually sell copyright. That's why you never want to go to a traditional book publisher and sell all rights. Oh, that's just disastrous, which I did for a lot of years because that was the only game in town. Just basically, it's magic because somebody buys something and no, you still have the copyright and you can still sell it again. Wonderful. That's what the Magic Bakery is. It's an entire book and it's an entire course in one of our classes, but it's also a book.
Andy Chapman has a question. Does Dean still find time to read outside of all that writing?
Oh, sure. The problem is that about, I think it was 10 years ago now. 10 years ago this coming summer, I had a stroke while I was helping a friend. He was dead. I was taking care of his estate. and I was working too hard and on too much caffeine and doing everything. And I had a stroke and lost an eye. And so I only have one eye. And so I have to be very careful on my reading and how much computer time I spend. And so I have to prioritize it. So, of course, writing is first. And so I prioritize that. And then I have the workshops I do and the email and stuff like that. But I'm constantly taking breaks and looking out the windows and going on walks. And I do a lot of exercise. I just ran a marathon this year.
Wow.
Actually, I sort of finished a marathon. I don't know if you'd call it successfully running a marathon, but I finished a marathon. I'm 70 years old and I finished a marathon.
Wow.
And so I kind of balance the screen time, the writing time. And so the long way around to answer that question is, I just read a brand new novel that Chris just finished. And then I just read literally last night for a brand new novella that Chris just finished. So I probably read quite a bit. Reading is really important to writing. You just got to do it because it keeps replenishing and doing things, as much as you can outside with this pandemic. You can't go too far, but eventually we'll be out of this thing, I hope.
Yeah. We got to mention your wife, Christine, there. We got a question from Robin Sarti, who says his wife, Christine Catherine Rush, is also a fabulous author. What are the main differences in their writing approaches? Do they write together, shared writing space, or separate offices? And how do they balance creative time and family time?
Oh, well, we have no kids or anything. We have a couple cats. But we've been together for 35 years. And right from the beginning, we stayed a long ways apart. A long ways. We had for 23 years on the Oregon coast, literally it was a 10-bedroom house sitting up on the cliff overlooking the ocean. And it was fantastic. And we also then bought the neighbor's house, and she had her office over there, and I had my office in another building. We had this entire compound for 23 years that, if one of us wasn't sure where the other one was, it was difficult to find because it was just gigantic. Now we live in a condo in downtown Las Vegas, and she has an office on the other side of a wall from me here, and I have this office. But then we have another condo that we have just got down. We're up on the one of the penthouse condos. We have a condo down on the first floor that we're going to use for offices and stuff. And she's basically spends most of her writing time and stuff down there. And I'm here in my little alcove. I've got 7 screens around me. I'm completely encircled by screens, and and big Macs, the biggest Macs with secondary screens and stuff. And so I'm kind of in my little alcove here, and one of them's my writing computer. One of them's my internet computer. I have ancillary computers for doing covers and things like that. So we stay way apart, and we never write. We tried to write together. We did a lot of books, actually, writing to Catherine Wesley, the one you mentioned earlier. Is a pen name. And in fact, we just did we just finished a Kickstarter that did really well. It surprised us. That has 6 collections of our science fiction short stories, 10 of hers and 10 of mine, 120 stories. And we're calling it Colliding Worlds. It'll be out in May, I think. All 6 books will be out in May. And we kickstarted this, and we did a video. And I think if you go to Colliding Worlds on Kickstarter, you can see us talking together about our collaboration process, which is non-existent. When we wrote novels together, either she wrote the whole thing, even though both of our names were on it, or I wrote the whole thing, or I wrote a very short first draft, like 100-page first draft of the novel that had no setting, no dialogue, nothing. It was just basically plot. And I'd give it to her, and she'd what she called color. She'd color in the dialogue and the setting. And that's how we collaborated. Otherwise, we'd kill each other. Not kidding.
I got one more question from Tanya Scott, who says, Dean inspired me to self-publish. He's so astute on the business side. Can you ask him where he thinks publishing will be in 10 years' time? I mean, we've just gone through incredible changes in the publishing industry. What do you see in the future, Dean?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question because of the aspect of what's going on right now. I mean, traditional publishing on the novel side, not the magazine side. Magazines are still good for writers, and they do good publicity. But the The novel side in traditional, both in the States and in Britain and in Canada, is pretty much they're grabbing all rights and they're not releasing books back to authors, and it's a disaster. And they're not paying hardly anything. In fact, even the bestsellers have dropped their income by something like 90%. It's a disaster going on. So what's going on with traditional is it gets a lot of press because indie publishing, meaning writers doing it themselves, are, we don't have a marketing team. There's millions of us, but we don't have a marketing team. And so, we don't get much press. We just do our job and put up stuff and make money. Where will it be in 10 years? I think there will be a couple remaining, one or two in the States, maybe a couple in Britain, and maybe one in Canada, and a couple each country will have one or two, often connected by the same conglomerate behind it, that will be doing traditional publishing. Meaning the traditional publishers don't sell to readers. They sell into the sales chain, the trade. And so they're more concerned about selling, and bookstores are going down left and right at the moment. And Amazon is controlling, and the only way books are really being sold is online at this point. So everything's going that way. I think there'll be a couple traditional publishers left, and I think 90% of all books will be published by basically indie writers or people like me and Chris, or, we have our own publishing company. We started WMG Publishing. We have 5 people working for us up in Oregon. They have their own offices up there. We sell books to them. We don't sell them. I mean, we license them to WMG. But that's it. We also license to the magazines like Asimov's and the big magazines too. That will continue on. Kevin J. Anderson and his wife, Rebecca Moesto, both bestsellers like Chris and I, they have their own company called Wordfire. A lot of people like that are starting up their own company with employees. They started on their own. We started WMG on our own. Basically, it was just me and Chris. And eventually it built out so that we could hire people to do stuff that we didn't want to do anymore. So there's going to be a lot of those, and there will be a lot of writers just doing it themselves. Basically, a friend of mine who is making a ton of money and writing about 4 books a year, I think. And he has a publishing empire on a laptop. It's just him. He does everything. He does the covers. I do my own covers on Smith's Monthly. I do my own covers on both the short stories and on the novels and on the cover of the magazine. And I do all the layout in the magazine. I do it all still because it's just easier. And so I think that's where it's going to be in 10 years. I think it'll be mostly indie and these small companies like Wordfire, like WMG. There's numbers of them. WMG is about the size of Bain Books here in the United States, which is a science fiction publisher. Most of the big imprints and stuff will be gone in 10 years. There just won't be anything left. There'll be licensing houses in 10 years that will be taking all those poor traditionally published writers who couldn't get their books back and things like that, who sold into it, and just basically making money off them, and the authors won't get anything. It'll be a sad time for a lot of writers. It'll kill a lot of careers. So you've got to be adaptable. You have to learn how to do your own covers. You got to find someone who can find typos for you. You don't need an editor. Absolutely, that's one of the scams that I should have mentioned earlier, is needing an editor. Basically, you just need someone to find typos. And then you put it out. It's very easy to do.
Fantastic stuff. Dean Wesley Smith, thank you so much for speaking to us today. We've all been taking notes. We've all been scribbling notes. We're going to be listening back to this again and again because it's just chock full of the most amazing advice. Thanks so much, and hope to speak to you again one day.
Okay, thanks a lot, and thanks for having me. Take care and stay safe.
What are your writing dreams? Finishing that book, quitting the day job, becoming a best-selling author? Well, over 4 years, we've studied the advice of over 300 best-selling authors who've collectively sold over 500 million books. And we are excited to announce the Bestseller Academy. If you're ready to take your writing to the next level with accountability, craft, and coaching, your bestseller dreams are now only a click away. To find out more and apply, visit bestsellerexperiment.com/academy. That's bestsellerexperiment.com/academy. My goodness me, where do we start, Mr. Stay? There is so much to unpack from that interview. Now, I do love someone who comes on the show and tells us how it is, because there is so many things. We know there's so many aspects to writing. And we've been doing this show now for 4.5, closing on 5 years. We're going to be up to 5 years in October. But it still amazes me how many different ways there are to write. And I think Dean has given us such a lot of food for thought in that interview. Big thing, though, that stands out for me out the gate. Such a truism. I love it. The reason he's so successful is he's just put in more hours than everyone else. I think there's something to be said about that. It's not necessarily just about how quickly you can type.
Yeah, it's not. I mean, he's put the hours in, but he's not letting that critical voice hold him back. And I think this is such a key thing to understand, in that, especially if you're starting out, because if you're a writer, you've read books. And if you've read books, you've got a certain taste. You know a good book from a bad book, okay? So you've read, you'll have read a novel by your favorite author. You might have read one of Dean's novels, one of Catherine's novels. You've read it, you enjoyed it, you've had a really, really good time. Then you start to write your novel, and then you start thinking, well, it's not as good as theirs, so therefore I can't be any good. And that starts to cripple you. It starts to, it starts to put, weight on your feet. It slows you down. And I think if you're going to take anything away from this, it is ignore that critical voice. Just keep writing, because finishing is so important. And weirdly, I'm at that stage at the moment. I'm right in the muddy middle of my novel. And there are things where I could stop. I got to a bit today, and I realized, I need, because it's set in the war, I need a barrage balloon. I need a barrage balloon to make this work, this action sequence work. And I know that I need to go back and seed that idea so it doesn't just pop out of anywhere. Now, the old me might have gone back and done that and fixed that. And while I'm fixing that, I'm going, I need to fix that, and I need to fix that. And I now know enough just to go, I'll leave a note, I'll come back, I'll fix it, and I'm just going to keep going. And I'm going to finish it, and I'm going to get to the end, because the most important thing is finishing. But
Yeah, that was huge, actually. I think I love Dean's take on that. I love the fact that it's like, you just finish it. You finish it whether you think it's a pile of rubbish or not. And you're so right, Mark. I mean, it's one thing that I've talked about in coaching so many times, is that what we always do when we compare our work, which we do, it's just a human nature to do that. But what we do is we always look upwards. And like you say, we sit and read the bestseller books ever. We read the Kings, we read the Tolkiens, we read the Grishams, we read, all the books that, the Agatha Christie books, the people who have been at the top of their game for so long. And then we always compare ourselves to them. What we actually need to do is we need to buy a bundle of the worst books ever written, the 20 worst books ever written, read those, and then write our book, and we'll be like, I'm absolutely killing it. You see, because that's the point, is that if we're even getting close to that, the upper echelons of the most brilliant writers to ever walk this planet, then we're doing well. So it is, he's so right. And then it's the biggest, self-criticism is the biggest destroyer of dreams. At the end of the day, we can convince ourselves, we can talk ourselves out of writing, ultimately by pretending that we're no good. The point is, whatever you write will be enjoyed by someone, and it might be enjoyed by millions. You just don't know. But if you don't put it out there, you'll never find out.
No, absolutely. I think the other big thing to take away, his quote was, I care about having fun in the process of writing and following my characters. Whatever comes out at the end, comes out at the end, and I let that be. And that's this idea of writing into the dark, of just having the luxury of just going, I'm just going to write whatever today, and it's going to take me wherever I go. And I think there will be people listening to this who will be terrified by that. And there'll be people listening to this who will be like, this is like the red pill in the Matrix. This has just opened up a whole new world for me. And we want to hear from you. If you've listened to Dean and he's made you, if it's a revelation, if you're going, you mean I can write anything I want and just roll with it, then we want to hear from you, because that, for some people, that is so incredibly liberating.
Yes. Yeah. And that's what it's really about. I mean, I think Dean also talked about this idea of getting too involved in thinking about the product whilst you're writing the book. And, there's a brilliant adage, and we all know the adage of, life's a journey, not a destination. And it is about enjoying as much as you can the process of writing, because actually the majority of your time, at least in the creation of the book, will be spent writing. Obviously, we know that there's a lot of time got to be spent marketing and doing and planning and other things. But such a huge chunk of our life, if we're going to be writing all our life, is going to be spent writing. So we've got to learn. For some people, it is about learning to enjoy the process of writing, all of its highs and lows. And Dean, I really get the sense that Dean has found that sweet spot where, and he says it, and it's a really good thing to remember, this isn't a job. If you can get to a place in your life where you love it so much, I know this is you, Mark, as well, because you talk about, I get to do this for a living, right? It's like, if you get to wake up every day and do what you love, then it isn't work. It's fun, and you feel almost like guilty that some people are going to work and doing a job which they absolutely hate, because you get up to each day to create. And I mean, I must admit, I never feel like when I coach and I write, it doesn't feel like a job. It feels like it's inspiring to do, and it's fun to do, and it never feels like an effort. And I never get out of bed going, oh God, I've got to coach again today. It's like, bring it on. This is excellent, right?
I think there will be writers out there who might feel trapped, though. And this is where this is the thing that I think Dean has escaped from, because he's had a career where he spent a considerable amount of time working with publishers, working with editors, doing these writing a Star Trek novel. You just can't go, right, I'm going to write whatever I want. There will be a series Bible. There will be,
it's your alarm just got off.
There will be, you can't have Captain Picard acting out of character or whatever. You have to stick to certain guidelines, and that is quite constricted. And, writing within constraints is fun, and writing tie-ins is its own skill. But I imagine that after a couple of decades of doing that, it can wear you down. You might think, right, stuff this for a lark. I am going to write in the dark. I'm going to do whatever I want to do. And there's a part of me thinking that when I get to 70, I hope that's me. I hope there's a point where I'm not worrying about what the publisher is expecting. I'm not worrying about what the marketing department is expecting. I mean, I'm working on book 3 of a series, and there are expectations, and there's a part of me that puts them aside. But, at some point I'm going to have to confront those expectations. I'm going to have to, whereas with Dean, he's in a position now, having had the benefit of, years of experience, of being able to say, yeah, I'm writing whatever the hell I want. And there will be writers out there who are just starting out who might hear that and go, great, I can do that too. And I think if you can do that, all power to you. But there will be writers like me who are some way into a career, or they want to write for a specific market, or there's a specific genre they want to work with, who might run away from that or might find that a little bit terrifying. But I think a career evolves over time. A career changes. And, for me, I want to be Dean when I grow up.
Well, exactly. And let's not forget that Dean has put in, he's put in his time. He had his 7 years, like 10% of his life he spent in the darkness. I mean, he talked about writing in the darkness, but he was in the darkness for those 7 years. He said he almost gave up. We know there's a lot of people listening to this right now who've been hammering away at writing for years and are kind of like just thinking, when is it going to happen? When am I finally going to write that book? When am I finally going to get my break? But remember, like Dean put those 7 years in. And if you are one of the lucky few who shows up and decides they want to become a writer, writes their first book, gets it published, sells 1 million copies, you are phenomenally amazing, because you're one of the chosen few. For the rest of us, it's about the hard graft every day. and it is a marathon, and it's they always say that the longer you stay in the race, the more likely you are to finish, and the more likely you're going to be in a very small percentage of people that get across that finish line. So Dean's put in the hours, and he's earned his spurs, so to speak, and he is able to talk from that perspective, looking backwards, where most of us are kind of in the mire looking forwards. In the two aspects of looking forwards to when things happen, but also looking forward and imagining what life could be like if you could get to a place when you're, at whatever age, incredibly successful, selling lots of books. But so many good principles, I think, that Dean covered there. And one of them was just, keep going, don't ever give up, get to the end. Absolutely. What else jumped out for you? I like the bakery concept. That was pretty interesting.
Yes, and that's quite. I'm glad Queeve asked that question because my bakery is more of a tiny little cart rather than a full-on, bakery.
Delicatessen.
Yes, exactly. Full-on delicatessen. So it is great. And if you go to Dean's website, you look in there and it's like, I can have that. I can have Westerns. I can have science fiction. I can have this. I can have that. It is a great choice. And I think that's a really interesting point is that you need to have, I think, a variety on your backlist. And this is one of the things, he's, as you can probably tell, he's quite down on publishers, whereas I tend to love them. But publishers can constrain you. They can say, well, you've written this kind of book and we only really want this kind of book from you in the future. And, 10 years ago, that would have been crippling for a lot of writers. Like, well, I want to write this. I want to write. Well, now you have the opportunity to do that. And I don't think it needs to be a binary either or situation. I will write what my publisher wants from me because that's what I'm contracted to do. But then I can also write this other stuff and self-publish it and do whatever the hell I want. So, the opportunities are there.
Although I must say, Mark, and I don't often do this, but I do disagree with Dean on that point, and I'll explain why. I disagree because it's like we built the Academy as a choose your own adventure, and the very foundations of why we built the Academy is we want to recognize that every single author is unique. And Dean's approach works brilliantly for him as someone who can prolifically write, absolutely, and have the time to write 250 plus novels. That's very, very unusual for someone to have that much time. And so I think to tell people that this is the way you have to do it is great if all of the other conditions fit, and it absolutely works, and Dean's proof of that. However, let's just take it from, say, my perspective as someone in their 40s with 3 children. I don't have the time to write the number of, I will never write probably 250 books in my life. So I don't want people thinking, oh, that's how Dean's done it, we've got to do it. What I would say is take a step back and ask yourself, what are the conditions of your life? If you're able to write, I mean, we didn't ask Dean, but I'm sure he writes many, many hours a day and he's putting out 1,000 words an hour. If you're able to do that, brilliant. We've seen Shannon Mayer do it, and she has children and she has a child and she manages to do it. But that's her full-time job. What about for the majority of people who those conditions don't apply? I think I would say that actually the reverse is true. And again, it's horses for courses. It's just my opinion. But I'm a proponent of the idea of the one thing. Like, pick a genre and get good in it. And if you get success, then go large, then go broad if you want to write other genres. Don't flip-flop between books. Like, don't write a romance and then a crime and then, because I'll take a music analogy and it's a very clear one when you hear it. But if I were to write an album, say an electronic album, a heavily electronic album, and then I were to write a heavy metal album, my fans wouldn't know what on earth I was up to, and I wouldn't be able to build up a base of fans. So in this day and age of indie authors, we see people like Shannon Mayer. She focuses on one genre, and it's not just one genre, it's a subgenre. It's urban fantasy, and that's how she's built up. Now, she's got a big audience now. If she wanted to go and write a romance, and she has actually gone off into a couple of other genres now once she's successful. But I think if you're starting out, you should definitely not flip-flop genres because you will spread yourself so thinly that you'll never really get a foothold and you're constantly scrabbling. I mean, I don't know what you think about that, Mark, because you've got different perspectives on
Allow me to play devil's advocate, my lad, and contradict my learned colleague. I think, though, if you're just starting out, why the hell not write everything and have a smorgasbord, you know?
I agree.
That could be your thing. That could be your thing. You could be the write anything person.
But not 800-page books, right? I mean, maybe short stories. Do you think?
Well, I mean, this is it. What is your ultimate goal? You know, this is something we ask people on the academy to tell us. What is it you want? What is it? Some people just want to be a crime writer. Good for you. Okay, let's focus on that. Some people, I mean, me, I do want to write a bit of everything. I've written horror. I've written cozy sort of horror. I've written science fiction. I've written time travel. I've written funny stuff. There's a film project that's coming up that might be a rom-com. A straight out rom-com. It's just I like to ditz around and do different kind of things. Probably, as you say, probably to the detriment of my career. If I had picked one thing and gone with it, maybe I'd have got there a bit faster. But I think the really important thing that Dean said is having fun in the process. And all of these things make me happy. And if you're happy, stick it. If you find your genre, as Shannon has, for example, she's found a genre and writing brings her joy, then brilliant. And if you're happy doing that, then and if you can find, because I remember talking to a writer who worked on the TV show Doctors, which for a lot of screenwriters in the UK is that Doctors is a daily soap opera essentially set in a hospital or a GP. I've never actually watched it, which is probably why I didn't get to write on it. But and I was like, I don't want to write about doctors. And they said, actually, it's kind of almost like a blank template where you can write about whatever you want. So if there's an issue that you want to confront, you can kind of shoehorn it into that and you can take fun in it. So they were able to find the joy in writing that, whereas I was like, oh, I don't want to write that. So if you can, wherever you can find joy writing, whatever makes you happy while you're writing, if you can sit down like Dean and me every morning and go, here we go, then you're clearly doing the right thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, again, it goes back to how quickly can you do this? I think my point about, if it takes you 2 years to write one book, then jumping genre is going to be a challenge. If you can pop out a book a month and you're actually doing it to try different genres and see what one you love, that's brilliant. That's amazing, because you do want to like work out what you most enjoy writing. And also there's two different types of people. They're the people that are, I mean, in the world, there are people who are job for life kind of people. They pick their one specialty and they become a lawyer, or they become a doctor, or they become a teacher, and that's what their focus is. And you've got nutters like me that kind of do 100 different projects, and I always want to try something different because I'm fascinated by learning. And I think people have to also, again, it's a self-reflection on of yourself as a person and a writer. Like, do you like to stick with something and go really deep in it, or do you like the smorgasbord? Do you like the variety? And by understanding that about yourself, I think you can best personally answer whether you're going to become that very deep genre writer, or you're going to be someone like Dean that can just pick up anything. I mean, it's like it's a bit like musicians. You either learn one instrument and you become an expert at that instrument, or you become like the multi-talented, I almost said busker, but that doesn't sound very good. The multi-talented musician that can create their own album and they play a bit of everything. It takes two different types of people. So I think people need to recognize, I think that's the main point. People need to recognize what kind of writer they are. And it's not that you have to force yourself into one route or the other, but it's fascinating and I love it. But let's ask our listeners, what kind of writer are you? Are you a writer that wants to explore different genres and loves the idea of variation, or are you a writer that wants to go deep and really kind of like just keep very narrow and niche? It's up for debate. So let us know. Pop over to Facebook, Twitter, drop us an email and tell us what you see yourself as, or if you're going to try something different, having heard this podcast as well.
Can we talk a little while about Heinlein's rules as well?
I think we should, because that was fascinating. Yes.
Just for listeners who don't know, Robert A. Heinlein he's a giant in American science fiction. He wrote Starship Troopers, Stranger in a Strange Land, and came out of that pulp fiction, science fiction background where, you had authors writing, they were paid, by the word, writing for pulp magazines. So these guys were knocking out story every day. So they became incredibly proficient at what they do. And Heinlein's rules, which are, as I think Dean said, they're pretty much impossible to follow. I think Heinlein himself said they're impossible to follow. So rule 1 is you must write. Rule 2, finish what you start. Rule 3, and this is the controversial one, I want to circle back to this, you must refrain from rewriting except to editorial order. Rule 4, you must put your story on the market. Rule 5, you must keep it on the market until it is sold. Rule 6, start working on something else. Now, rule 3 is the one, because what was it Robert said? What Dean said, he said rewriting is bogus, that thing of listening to your critical voice. And I think rule 3 is a bit, it's like one of those bits of the Bible that scholars can't quite agree on. It's that bit in Life of Brian where they're going, it's a shoe, it's a sandal, it's a shoe. And I think this is one of these, because this thing of don't rewrite except to edit. I mean, Heinlein himself, later in life, he confessed that he did revise and rewrite his work. I think people do. My interpretation of it is it's generally a bad idea to stop and try and fix something if you're in the middle of a draft. Get to the end and fix it. This is what I was talking about earlier. So that's my interpretation of it. I'd be interested to hear other people's interpretations of it as well. But it is something that I think people hear it and think, oh, okay, oh gosh, have I been doing it wrong? Whereas I think once I've finished, I love editors, I love publishers. I love that collaboration. I love hearing another opinion on it, and if it's constructive. I've got to the point now where I'll hear stuff from an editor and I don't feel obliged to take it on. It's not prescriptive. I can take it or leave it, but having that extra perspective makes me a better writer. It's not it's not crippling me, it's not killing originality. It's making me think, oh, okay, maybe I can bring this to it, maybe I can bring that to it. And of course, not all editors are made equal. Some are great, some are kind of average, So that's my take on that.
I think it's fascinating. And I also think that anyone who's spent a lot of time writing books probably knows that the more they write, the less notes they get in terms of fundamental structure. I know, Mark, you're looking at me now, but I know you've said recently in coaching that you learn through the process of editing to self-correct things for future. So there's a degree of editing which is kind of teaching you the things that you need to kind of change and work on. And so the editing feedback you get changes the more you write.
Yeah.
And I think it's important as well that, again, it depends on who you are. We've had a very small number of authors come on this show saying, first draft, what do you mean second draft? Just write your first draft, get out there. I'm sure there are people out there who have the talent to be able to write a brilliant first draft, but it depends on whether you're the kind of person that needs 3 drafts, and if you're someone that can just bash it out. And it is great.
I mean, he mentioned Dean Koontz, he mentioned Stephen King. I don't think Stephen King's a liar. I think when Stephen King gives out advice, he's giving out advice to people like us who are maybe just starting out or learning. Because I think Dean Koontz, Dean Wesley Smith, Stephen King, they are Mozart and we're Salieri. Okay, I think you do get people where it just comes a little bit easier to them. They just have a natural talent for it. It's where, Dean was saying, he was never, he was not one of these kids who wanted to write from day one. Yeah. It just kind of came to him. And I think Stephen King, there's a reason why Stephen King writes, why his books feel effortless. And I'm not suggesting that Stephen doesn't work hard on his books. I'm sure he works incredibly hard, but he has a knack for storytelling that is just on another level. In the same way that Shakespeare did, in the same way that F. Scott Fitzgerald had, or whatever. These amazing. There are people who are just up there, and we can all just sort of stare up at them and go, "Gosh."
Yeah, and be inspired by them, but not say that's how I have to do it because that's how they do it. I think it's really important to remember that. And I think the last one's quite interesting as well. You said in the Heinlein's rules, the one about start a new book, but I'm assuming that you don't wait for it to be sold before you start a new book. 6 actually comes at this once, I guess, you put it out there and it's doing its circle. Yeah. Because otherwise you could be waiting quite a while in some instances.
I mean, I tend to overlap now, to be honest. So I'm sort of in the middle of the draft of book 3, but I've also just started a draft of a screenplay because the ideas are coming and I'm excited about it and I want to get it down on paper. So,
I think the crucial thing is you get it finished so you can get it out there. So whilst you're writing in that project, something is out there circulating, which might bring home the bacon. Absolutely. The problem is if you've not finished any of your books, then nothing's out there circulating and guarantee you're not going to get a deal. But I think the more of those kind of irons in the fire that you have, the more chance you're going to hit success. So yeah, really fascinating stuff. We're going to go deeper into this. If you like this kind of stuff, by the way, we're going to dive deep into these types of rules in the Academy as well, and also have more of these discussions about who are you as a writer, because that's often the thing that gets missed in all of this. Like, who are you as a writer? Like, you have to learn, you have to build that self-awareness, and you only learn it by doing it as well.
Yeah.
But I love it. The more kind of Dean Wesleys we have on this show, the better, because I think it's so great to get kind of differences of opinions, because it really opens up these incredible discussions as well. So thank you, Dean, for that, and all the inspiration that you've given people and all of those breakthroughs as well. So, Mr. Stay, social media quickly before we wrap up.
Yeah, just a few things to go. Hayley Coulter, who we've mentioned on the show before, she writes as HD Coulter. Her new book, Saving Grace, has just come out. She went on a 24-hour writing binge. So she wrote solidly for 24 hours, no sleep, only writing.
Oh, wow.
Over 12,000 words, 6 chapters of book 3 written. And she actually did it on the 16th of May. She think I might pass out now. So that was a 24-hour writing sprint. I'm not sure. Not sure I would do that, but congratulations, Hayley.
That makes NaNoWriMo sound like a walk in the park, doesn't it?
Exactly.
Hayley, utterly brilliant and utterly bonkers. And why did you do it? That's what I want to know. Was it just some crazy idea you've had? 12,000 words, though. I mean, that's a month's writing for some people. So that's fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely.
Unbelievable.
Absolutely. So that's great. And then we've got Andrea J Skinner, who has started listening to the Bestseller Experiment early this spring, and now she's finally caught up. She says, I'm gonna revise my novel while I consider my next questionable life choice. Just kidding. It's great. Loads of info for writers. Go check it out. I have said to Andrea online that counselling is available for people who have binged the show and have had an overdose of the two of us. So hang in there, Andrea. There is help at hand. And last but by no means least, one of the members of our Bestseller Experiment group on Facebook, Lorna Cook, I saw her book in Sainsbury's the other day, and we've talked about how when you see a book in a supermarket, it's often quite a difficult route to get it in there. So the girl from the island, congratulations on that, Lorna. It was great just to see, oh, I know her. Brilliant, in Sainsbury's. So big congrats there.
Ironically, probably right next to the bakery as well, Marco.
Yeah.
Brilliant, Lorna. That's so brilliant. How inspiring is that? We actually have a really fun thing on the on our Bestseller BXP team group, where whenever we see a book of one of the group members, there's only about 200 people in this group. Whenever we see a book in a store, you have to take a photo of it and post it up. And there's been quite a few, haven't there? W.H. Smith and I think one of yours, Mark, I believe, recently. Was that right?
I've had quite a few. It's interesting that because bookshops only opened a couple of weeks ago in the UK, and it's been almost like the book has been relaunched. Because, we talked about being a bookshop book.
Yes.
And again, I take issue with what Dean said earlier in the podcast about bookshops being dead. Certainly in the UK, indie bookshops are thriving. They're actually doing really, really well. And it's been great because people are finding the book in bookshops and they're sending me photos, and it's almost like the book has been relaunched. It's been absolutely amazing. And thank you to everyone who's done that, because it completely makes my day. So yeah,
absolutely. And if you're new to the podcast, the book is called Crowfolk, just in case you were wondering. Yes. And I am waiting, though. I am waiting, and we've got a new challenge, and I want this. Maybe someone in the Academy could do this for us. The first ever book photographed in a backpacker hostel in Nepal.
In Nepal, yeah.
Wouldn't that be amazing?
Challenge, yeah.
Because that's gone beyond the shiny. That's the one that's been read 30 times, where you can't even read the title on the spine. That's the one we all want. But anyway, so well done to everyone, and keep on keeping on, folks. This is what it's all about. Every single day, get those 200 words down. If you want to write, join the 200 word challenge, 200wordchallenge.com. Join us today, and thousands of other people all banking their words. Let's get to 20 million easily before the end of the year. I think let's set that as a little challenge. If you've got any dream declarations you want to share with us, please email us and write in. Tell us what you want to achieve. We'll publicly declare them on this show, which means you're not getting out of them. Because Mr. Stay's got this most incredible diary where he actually writes everything down. It's quite fantastic. And Mark, tell everyone about social media.
Yeah, come and find us online. If you want to drop us a line, go to bestsellerexperiment.com. There's a contact tab there where you can email us and we read them all. On social media, we are Bestseller Experiment on Facebook. On Twitter and Instagram, we are at BestsellerXP. And if you've enjoyed this podcast, if it's changed your life in any way, if it's inspired you, please give us a rating on your podcast provider and subscribe. These things make us a lot more visible and help us get found by other writers. I thank you, as always, to our editors, Dave and JD, as well.
Brilliant stuff. And if you'd like to join Mark and I and get privately coached by us in the Bestseller Academy, remember, we are opening the doors now. Get on over, get your applications in, and we look forward to seeing and getting to know you and your book there. And it's academy.bestsellerexperiment.com to sign up. So it's a goodbye from Mark 1.
And it's goodbye from Mark 2.
Goodbye.